All right. Welcome, Jim. How you doing, Jim?
Hey, good afternoon.
We
It's great up here. It's going to rain all day.
awesome. It actually finally feels like fall here. Um, we're gonna have to come up with both some sort of title for this thing as well as some sort of like splash screen, because right now all people are seeing is the cover of a Dragon magazine and going, "What the hell am I looking at?" So, well, here's what you're going to be looking at. You're going to be looking at Brant and Jim making our way through varying Dragon magazines over the years, just riffing on some random commentary with these things. So this is sort of part nostalgia trip, part classic review. I don't know what else would we call this, Jim.
Well, I have a theme that sits at the center of it for me, and that is remembering the fact that as we sit here today in 2017, there's this really big gulf between role playing gamers and war gamers. And whatever may be the case, whatever caused that gap, it was not always so. This is a memory of a time when those of us that loved RPGs and war games could sit in the same room together and have a civil conversation.
Yeah, and let's not even mention the Euro board gamers. So who
Yeah, I don't know how they took over the conversation.
who
To
don't
tell
like
you
any
the
of them.
truth, yeah, I know it's amazing to me because in many respects they're the late ones to the party.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
I've loved my share of Euro games, obviously the crunchier ones, but it is interesting to me that they're the ones that came last to the game, and yet they're the ones that have seemingly done the most.
They're,
They're the ones that have really taken over and
they're the
owned
ones
the
you find on the
conversation.
shelves in Target.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's that point.
Well, one of the other things I think us old farts, and I'm now squarely in the old fart category at this point, much to my own chagrin, that one of the things that matters a little bit to us, because we remember what it used to be, is Dragon Magazine, as much as anything else, gave the hobby gaming community kind of this unifying thread to rally around, and that we could share and have a common point of reference for everybody. And you don't have that anymore as things have gotten more and more niche. You've now got, I mean, look, let's face it, we've got 10 or 12 great wargaming magazines out there, but they're all wargaming magazines. And you've got a handful of really good role playing game magazines out there, but they're role playing magazines. And this to say nothing of all this content that may have migrated online. Um, and there's a lot of really great content online, starting with us, of course. but but there was something cool about everybody being able to have that common point of reference, that common frame that you could refer back to that Dragon Magazine used to provide as much as anything. And that's why I was really enthused to see Gygax Magazine in its brief, like 2 or 3 year run there, try and bring back something like that. And of course, the legal shenanigans surrounding the last Mrs. Gygax kind of torpedoed all that, because God forbid somebody use the name and she not get like most of the royalties from it or something. I'm not really sure what all happened there, but um, it was nice that somebody was trying to bring back something like that, and unfortunate that it didn't work. Um, so, all right, enough generic rambling about the overall thing. So really, what we've got here is we've got some digital copies of Dragon magazines that we're just going to flip through and just talk about as we go through them and see what we get. And we're going to sort of skip around throughout roughly the first 200 or so issues of Dragon, and just comment on all of it up to and including like the ads, the silliness, the cartoons in the back, the articles we thought were great, the articles we thought were crap, the games. Um, what did I miss? The artwork. So
Well, I think that and the experience, where things were placed and the things that were niched around in the corners. And we talked on the last Grogcast about the incredible joy of getting a new game in the mail. And it was absolutely the same for those of us that had games. Now, I was never a Dragon subscriber. I was an SP. I was a S&T subscriber, Strategy and Tactics. But I certainly had more than my share of Dragon magazines and also White Dwarf magazines, and the joy of opening those things up in a day before the internet is that's certainly part of the nostalgia here.
This was our internet.
Right. That's how we found out, and I think we'll see as we flip through this creature that there's a fair number of articles here that were the equivalent of our internet, going, oh my gosh, did you see what this company is coming out with? That's amazing. Let's get that thing.
Many of my Dragon magazines were purchased off the shelf at bookstores, a lot of them on military bases in Europe where we were living at the time, a bunch of them on on the shelves of bookstores stateside years later. And for a while there, the Comic and Games store that was across the street from school where I was, they would hold Dragon magazines for me just like they would hold the comics for me each week, and so that was always fantastic of them. So I loaded up on quite a bit. So Dragon magazine number 60 here. Dragon was sort of this was kind of beyond their experimental phase a little bit. When we go back and we pick up some from the early teens and 20s. We'll see them sort of stumbling around trying to figure out what works and what doesn't, as any new publication or media creation often does. By now, they had kind of stabilized things a little bit, but there's still a little bit of wide-eyed wonder going on in the way these guys are running things, as well as a couple of head-scratchers that make you just wonder how short they were for content. And we'll still see some of those as we go. But by number 60, I mean, they were, the first couple of years of Dragon magazine, they weren't a monthly publication, and so this is not just 5 years into it. This is a little more than just that. So here we go. We've got a board game in this one. We've got some elves in this one. We've got all kinds of nifty artwork. Let's see what we get. All right, here we are, and so this is one of the earlier ones that I could find that actually had a computer game ad in it. Over here on the left, automated simulations with games for the Ataris, the trash 80s, the Apple series computers, and old IBM computers. What's the earliest you ever went digital there, Jim?
Well, this is not just any game. This is, bear in mind, we're talking 1982 here. And by this point, I've already got my TRS-80 at home with a mighty 16K of RAM. And we're getting ready to see the advent of the Commodore 64. But this is the Temple of Apshai. and the Temple of Apshai, for those who don't remember, was one of, and you'll see who it's done by. It's done by Epyx. This is an Epyx game, which was the company that when the Commodore 64 took over the world and had its great war with the Apple II, had all these amazing, at their time, these were the first games that really talked. They actually had sounds, and you had Impossible Mission, and you had all their Olympics games, both summer games and winter games. And Epyx was one of the early big publishers in the time when computer games were most typically bought at corner stores in plastic bags on a punchboard wall hanging on hooks. And so
it's not like digital download was an option. I mean,
no, there was no DLC. Was the effort it took, the individual behind the counter. And the delightful thing was, they were very often older folks. They were individuals who were already in the business of selling something else. And they saw, well, maybe we can sell computer games. One of the guys I bought a lot of computer games from here in Milwaukee was a fellow who did he was a hobby shop. He sold models. And he decided to bring in a couple computer games on the side. Another one was sort of just a general convenience store that had a pegboard with a dozen games. The one I remember the most vividly, because I had to save up a whole lot to get it, was Tanktics for the TRS-80. But this Temple of Apshai, the ad copy is amazing. Be one of more than 16 million alter egos that your computer can generate. Okay, look. 16 million different versions of 3 sticks, sort of shaped into a little pyramid that moved space by space through the dungeon. All 16 million of them looked exactly the same. 3 little white sticks on a black field. And
you notice there's not a screenshot in this ad.
No. Your character will do whatever you want him to. Do battle in real time. And it's true. There are 3 little sticks set up in an inverted V kind of thing, and out of one of the arms would come a little jabbing pixel. And you had to do this in real time. Explore the various levels of the maze and discover the great treasure within. The game Gamma.
Yeah, that's the part that I wanted to point out on here, was that Gamma named it the computer game of the year. Gamma hasn't recognized computer games in over a decade.
And also, though, just for the record, just going to move on, they named the Temple of Epshai the computer game of the year. There's a non-zero chance it was indeed the computer game that year.
That's a good point.
So it's so what will you think of the Temple of Epshai now? Now that it's better than ever, better graphics, animated movement. And there is the TRS-80, and let's see here. Oh, that's just their trademark. I was just curious to see.
Just their trademark info.
And this came on a cassette.
Yes.
This loaded off of a cassette. So, my goodness, the Temple of Apshai available for purchase. And does it tell me how much it's going to set me back?
No, it does not.
It does not tell me. My guess is $20.
Which back then was actual money.
Was more money, yes. Yeah. So there's an epic set. That's wonderful. What a great start for when we're here with Dragon 60.
The entertaining part of this is not merely that this came on a cassette, but that there's at least a non-trivial portion of our audience, I'm figuring, that has no idea what a cassette is.
Right.
They don't. Not only do they not remember a time when cassettes may have been plugged into computers, they don't remember a time in which cassette decks came in cars. So
no, that is certainly so.
That hurts to say, but it's not wrong.
And look, and let me say this very clearly, and this is probably something I'm going to have to say a lot as we go through these magazines. There was nothing better about this than what we're playing today. We have great nostalgia. It's a great memory. But when you loaded this game into a cassette, and the cassette, you bought your TRS-80 from Radio Shack, a company some people may not remember.
Yeah.
you bought this from Radio Shack, and it was an actual desktop cassette player. Bog standard. There was nothing special about it. And you pushed play, and it loaded, and you had to type C load. I can't believe I still remember that. What have I forgotten? You typed C load, and it would then spin the tape. And as it spun the tape, 2 little asterisks would appear at the upper right of your computer screen, and they would flash. One would stay steady, and one would flash. And you would sit there, I'm not kidding, for 5 minutes, while it very slowly loaded into memory. And if at any time you got a C instead of a flashing asterisk, it meant you had a checksum error and had to start the whole process over again.
Yep.
And God forfend, as you say, many people don't remember these cassettes, they were fragile creatures. And if your cassette was wrecked, you were done.
Yeah.
There was no, people talk about Steam. Steam is the devil. Steam is bad. No, Steam is beautiful.
Yeah.
It is Shangri-La. Any digital storage that you can have is so, because if you messed up that cassette, if it got you got pizza on it or anything else, you were done. You were buying a new game.
Yeah, and good luck trying to dub a copy of the cassette to have a backup because they never quite played correctly. Well, look, we're like 6 minutes into this and we haven't made it off of page 2.
Let's keep moving.
We're not even on page 2. We're on the inside cover.
Good point.
Page 1, the ever-present Iron Crown Enterprises ads. These things ran for 20 years in Dragon Magazine. Spell Law, Arms Law, Pick'em. Here's my question: do you know a single person that ever played an ICE role-playing game?
An actual game? I knew people that played Mercs.
No. That actually sat down and played the Iron Crown Enterprises role-playing game with the 6-book series of them with, Spell Law, Arms Law, Creature Law, whatever all these different ones were.
No. I will answer. I will, Your Honor. I will answer the counselor's question directly. No.
Yeah.
These were always, in my experience, reference books. Just look what it says right under present spell law.
Yeah.
Over 2,000 spell descriptions.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
I've found people that have used parts of them. I've never ever found anyone that actually played the game. And look, I've been role playing since '81. You've got a couple of years on me there, but probably not too many more.
That's right.
And so, as we're recording this now, that's 30 something years worth of role playing, and I've never ever found anybody that could actually conclusively admit to and prove that they had played any of the ice games as they are written in the ice books.
Yeah.
Now, thankfully, their advertising was around forever, helped keep Dragon Magazine going. All right, as we start to get into our table of contents, so this is volume 6, number 10. So this is April of '82, and so this is, still early '80s. But again, we had kind of settled into a bit of a rhythm with Dragon Magazine, so they'd been around for a little bit, and so off we go. Little bit of introduction, kind of some of those mandatory publisher notes here and there. Back when Kim Mohan used to always have a little 200-word column at the very beginning. But our table of contents, our special attraction was the Flight of the Boodles, and then there's a whole section on elves in this one, as well as some of the regular columns you can see down in the bottom right corner. The letters from readers. Nowadays we call those message boards. The Sorcerer's Scroll, the convention schedule, and some other pieces. So we'll work our way down to those. Out on a limb. So hey, look, reader feedback.
And there's very special feedback. We have to start in the middle of the page.
The one from Gygax?
E. Gary. Dude, it's your magazine, dude.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but there's a letter from a Roger Moore about an article by Roger Moore. So
yes, we're on Moore, and none of them apparently James Bond, but there it is. But it just cracks me up. And you know what? First of all, it cracks me up that Gary Gygax wrote a letter to his own magazine.
Yes.
And I understand that he was at some distance from Dragon, but nonetheless. Secondly, it's fascinating to me that he calls to account this person who wrote in the issue 2 before about aiming for realism in archery. You have to picture Gary Gygax opening up the Dragon, thumbing through its contents, and getting angry, or not angry, animated about this article. And then at the bottom, he says something that's actually important. It would seem that this article was about making archery more realistic in Dungeons & Dragons in your campaign. And Gary writes, the most important issue, however, is complication. For all of the work and time the author suggests is necessary to add realism, as he puts that in quotes, to archery in D&D gaming, trademark, is the game more fun because of it? I, for one, do not think so. And when all is said and done, the course of play is not materially affected for the better by the inclusion of complicated archery rules. I will be damned. Nice job, Gary. To hear him call for reasonability and fun over realism is a pretty cool thing.
Yes. There you go. All right, we've got some elves going on here, and as a person who has taught graphic design to journalism students, if you turned in that page over there on the right with the very poorly spaced lettering, I'm not sure I would grade it. I might just, sort of circle some red scribbles on it and hand it back to you. Because any high school level journalism student should be able to eyeball that and go, eh?
I have no idea what tech. I'm assuming they're using Quark for this.
This predates Quark, I think. I don't know that Quark was around in '82.
Okay, because that's when I started doing Paste Up. I started doing Paste Up in '84.
It may have been some manual paste up, but even manual paste up should not leave you this gigantic gap
Oh no, and the
around
letting is
Hyphen.
look at the letting on the Elven point of view.
Yes.
I mean,
Oh, it is painful.
that's goofy. I don't, well, and I may have said this before, but let's take this moment. All y'all that don't use justification when you're in Word or whatever software program you're using, you are spitting in the face of your elders, and we resent it. Don't rag left and right your stuff. Get it justified, because this is what we were confronted with in 1982, and this is the horror that we got. So.
So, in any event, that was a little bit of way too much technical knowledge for what you're looking at here. I suppose it's entirely possible that were they doing this digitally, they just forgot to load the font correctly and it defaulted to Arial or Geneva or something. So that is entirely possible and could be the source of our poor kerning as well as our bad, generic font.
Yeah.
Or it was just the person didn't know what they were doing. So,
Yes.
and you could be forgiven if thinking based on the illustration that there was going to be a significant article about Elven dental work in here as well. So
Yeah, it seemed to have way more teeth than humans do.
yes, and I always figured that if you really wanted to, if you're deep in a dungeon delve, merely based on the artwork that we have been presented with over the years, if you are deep in a dungeon delve and in a darkened cavern somewhere and suspect that there are drow watching you somewhere, that they are sneaking up on you or following you in the shadows, that really what you need is not a light spell. What you need to do is tell a particularly good joke, and when they start laughing, you can find them by their teeth.
Yeah, they are. This is one of the things. I mean, look, I'm a Tolkien kid, right? That's who I am. And so the coming of the deep elves, the dark elves, etc., was something of an anathema to me. And over the course of my life, they have, I suppose, predominantly under the influence of a very particular sequence of fiction books, elevated them to a much higher status.
Now, they were a big deal before the books.
Doubt, were they?
Yeah, they were.
To what do you date the ascendancy of the Drow?
Roughly this point in time, once they were statted out well enough in the D123 modules that people could then grab them and run with them and use them as their own player characters, I think is the point at which it got silly.
So it is. Drow or Drow, Vault of.
Yes.
Okay.
That's where I would lay the blame.
Okay. No, that makes sense. I had no. I've been through that. I've actually run that twice, I think, and I guess I didn't realize that was the stream from which it stemmed. I was far too young to know at the time, I guess.
Well,
but
I just remember after that one came out, suddenly everybody wanted to play Dark Elves, and it was almost a decade into my role playing career when the Salvatore books started to appear and everybody started falling on jumping on the Dritz train, and so folks were well in the tank for the Dark Elves before then.
I find it interesting. I've got these double screen just so I can get a better view. If you want to flip a couple pages ahead here to the very end of the article, there's a fascinating attribution, and we're certainly not going to undertake that here. But if you go to the very end of the article, the author writes that valuable information for this article was gleaned from Paul H. Coker's Master of Middle Earth paperback Ballantine books, which is sitting on my shelf. And though this book is concerned with the Tolkien novels and their representation of elves and the other races, there are nevertheless strong similarities in several areas between the elves of Tolkien and the elves of the AD&D game. No fooling.
Yeah.
That is actually an irritating comment.
Along with virtually every other facet of early D&D.
And they did AD&D to play Middle Earth. I'm not one of these guys that doesn't acknowledge the coming of other things and all this other stuff. But even guys who weary of the Tolkien depictions, guys like Ralph Bodley Scott, and some of the others who did the brilliant and underappreciated miniatures war game, Hordes of the Things. You should own Hordes of the Things, if only to read their characterization of the different fantasy races and the great bibliography they provide for reading different takes on them. And one of the best is their conversation about elves, where Bodley Scott says, the elves aren't nearly as nice as Tolkien seems to think. and that is something that even C.S. Lewis sort of gently poked his dear friend Tolkien about over the course of their long relationship. That, these elves, not always these noble creatures of the light that you seem to love so much, but I'm not sure how to characterize that line. There are nevertheless strong similarities in several areas between the elves of Tolkien and the elves of AD&D. You don't flip and say.
Yeah, you think? So, all right. The moving into the next article here, this whole Gods of the Elves thing. So this brings up one of my early pet peeves with D&D. And so, look, when you're in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, whatever, 4th grade is when I started role playing. When you're in 4th grade and you're checking out the early role playing stats and you start seeing the gods of whoever there, it gives you something to aspire to. It gives you something to run out and want to be really cool with. But this is the biggest problem with kind of some of the early D&D pieces, and that is they gave the gods stats.
Yeah.
And so what happens as soon as you give the gods stats? Let's go pick a fight.
Right.
Hey, look, an armor class of -5. I can hit that 322 hit points. I think I can take a swing at that. No. These are gods. These gods pick you up and move you around the planet as much or as little as they choose to. If you've seen the old the Jason the Argonauts, right?
Sure.
The gods pick you up and move you where they feel like. That was one of the great moments in the early '80s Clash of the Titans movie. Not the really bad remake of the past decade, but the early '80s Clash of the Titans movies, where
the really bad '80s, but in a good way.
Yes, campy. But where they, suddenly Perseus just wakes up in the middle of a coliseum somewhere. The gods kind of do to you what they feel like doing. It's not, it's not to mere mortals to go challenge a 23 charisma to a stare down. And so I think statting out the gods might have been one of the worst things about early D&D that there could have possibly been. And that was the source of much frustration for me.
Well, I'm rapping my table here in the fashion of the British Parliament and saying yes, amen. This is a rant of mine. I shan't go on it because you've done a fine job of characterizing it. But I will only say that I have a formal name for this. This is called the Pazuzu problem.
Okay.
And I have a dear friend who I've lost track of. And if by any chance, Dave Brown, if you hear the Grogcast, if you listen to Grogheads, call me, dude. I want to talk to you. He was from West Virginia, and he was an honest-to-goodness hillbilly. Never liked wearing shoes. Never always liked wearing his coveralls, and he spoke with a thick drawl from Brown County, West Virginia. And one day, this dear friend of mine come up to me and go, "Yeah, we're going to play some D&D." Like, that's awesome, man. What are you going to do? We're going to fight Pazuzu. Like, wait a minute. That's a Babylonian god of death.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we're going to do. It's like, I'm pretty sure he thinks you out of existence. No. Look, here are his stats. I said, I don't care about your stats.
Yeah.
He thinks you out of existence. That's what Babylonian death gods do. So, and it's so bizarre because again, I'm flipping around here, but I'm flipping forward to the Gary Gygax article in this creature, which you're going to, find a few pages later.
We'll get there.
What's Gary writing about? He's writing about cantrips.
Yeah.
Mini spells. That's what magicians do. Little spells. They don't, let's pick one here. Solinor Thelandria, god of archery and hunting. In no way related to Diana.
Or Uller.
But, you don't, or Uller, right? And then, as you correctly say, we're going to go and see, well, she's an 8th level bard. a 12th level thief. No, she shoots you.
Yes, you die.
What happens? She shoots you. Read the Iliad. This is the problem I have, probably more than anything else. It seems to replace reading. Read the Iliad. Read the Odyssey. Read the story. Read the
Mabinogion.
Right. Read all these tales. And what are they about? They're about people you can't hurt. Think of what Apollo does to Achilles around the gates of Troy. He runs around and going, "Can't catch me, bro. Can't catch me, bro." And Achilles says, "You are a jerk. You are a god. You are cheating me. I will not stop, but I know I can never catch you." That's what a god does. So
Yeah.
Agreed. Bad mistake. But they were trying to sell books. And you know what? I still think they would have sold plenty of copies of deities and demigods if they just telling us about this mythology was awesome. Telling us about mythologies, especially ones that maybe we weren't familiar with. And I don't mean the elves. I'm talking about the actual human, the mythology of the human past. How many kids, how many young people that are now adults, their first experience of Native Americans, whether they be North American or South American, their culture and their mythology, came through deities and demigods?
Well, a big chunk of us in our generation, yes. Our kids' generation's probably not so much.
No, but I'm saying that's it. I mean, that's what I'm saying. People who are now
their
adults.
exposure to Native Americans was through Disney's Pocahontas, and their exposure to what we think of as deities and demigods was through Percy Jackson, the Lightning Thief.
Yes.
Which is a perfectly good entry point for it, and I have no qualms with it at all. But it's very different than what you and I had.
Yeah. So good point.
Let's move past. So sage advice was sort of a Q&A for people to throw in. Look, this is the frequently asked questions of the analog age. This is before you were able to just hop on Board Game Geek and start asking questions of people. You had to write in and hope they picked your letter. So
you had to gamble a stamp.
We had the half-elven point, and stamps, kids. Stamps are those things you put on letters when you take them to the post office.
Yes.
So a little brief blurb about half-elves and why they're cooler than other people want to give them credit for. So here is another ad for why shouldn't your dungeon be? You call that a wall? So this is early terrain building, where you could go pick up some of the terrain tools, and of course, you don't get a picture of them.
No. but in Wisconsin, the place you could get it was Pegasus Games, which is not there anymore at that location, but it's still in Madison.
That is awesome.
Yep. So 35 years later, you can still. That's crazy to think. My God. 35 years later, you can go in and still check out that stuff. I dare say a lot of these other places have closed.
I'm just eyeballing the couple of ones that I would happen to know about. I do know that the Village Toy Shop in Slidell, Louisiana was there for quite some time. Corporate Square I don't think even exists anymore, that Midtown Shopping Center. But the Village Toy Shop in Slidell existed for quite some time because when we would go visit family, that's the one that I would want to go hit. Right down the street down there. So,
and folks, just cruise through this list and notice how many of them are not game specific.
Yes.
How some of them are
Newsstand International.
Ship Shop.
Yeah.
I don't even know what that is.
Okay, here are your cantrips and mini spells for apprentice magic users. For you junior kids there. What I think is cool about this, and this is something that I have come up with over the years, I enjoy low-powered role-playing gaming. I'm not a big Munchkin gamer. I'm not a Monty Hall gamer. I enjoy folks having to make do and having to find a solution out of the low-level abilities that you happen to have. I would rather sit down and play 6 different 2 to 3 adventure campaigns that all max out around level 5 than play one big campaign that takes you from level 1 to level 20. I know there's some people that fall in love with their characters and just want to see them all the way through their careers, and that's cool. And like I've done that, and I've enjoyed that over the years. But quite frankly, I enjoy the low-powered stuff where you've got to take these sorts of low-level spells like cough and giggle and blink and scratch, and have to use them to get out of a situation where you've got to be a little more quick-witted and you can't just brute force your way through stuff. And so, these couple of pages worth of cantrips here, Firefinger and Smoke Puff. I want the characters to be able to use these things and their wits to get through problems instead of just, screw it, I hit him.
No, and that's you are 100% correct. These are delightful. This is D&D at its very best, and when cantrips don't migrate in until 2nd edition, if memory serves, they become stock standard.
They become canon in 2nd edition because this is 1st edition cantrips right here.
Yeah, and just they're delightful. I think that they're exactly what they should be. They affect very little, but as you say, in the right hands and in the right circumstances, they could be pretty cool.
Yep.
And at the bottom of the page, Excellence in Metal, limited edition miniatures in Darien, Wisconsin. Praise be to Central Wisconsin and all it gave gaming.
Well, yeah, and it's funny, the earlier in Dragon you go, the more Wisconsin ads you have.
Yes. Yes, and there's oh my goodness.
Here's a handful more cantrips. Here's the ad for Gen Con 15.
Wait,
we just had our 50th anniversary show.
This is, oh my gosh, this is my first Gen Con. This is my first one.
There you go.
Gosh. There it is. Tournaments, seminars, demonstration games.
All right, Asgard minis. So here's some fun. I've asked this question before. I will ask it again, even though I think I remember your answer. Did you ever have a friend who laid some tracing paper on one of the minis ads, traced the image of the minis, and then used that, started modifying that to become their character portrait?
Absolutely.
Because I knew a whole lot of people who did.
Or frankly, they would just cut it straight out of their magazine.
Most of us would trace and then start modifying.
Because kids, it wasn't easy to get copies back then.
No. You went to the library and you paid a dime for a really sort of shifty kind of photocopy.
Dime? Yeah, I think the first copy ever, it's weird. Even though obviously a dime is worth more than it is now, I remember distinctly the copying cost of the very first machines I was using. My mother worked at a mimeograph store when she was younger. So my house was stocked with supplies and mimeograph machines. But the first Xerograph or Xerox copy was $0.25 to the public. Yeah. And as you correctly say, it was on this weird paper and it wasn't a good image. So I can see why pencil sketching would be a good idea.
Yeah, well, plus the pencil sketching gave you the option to kind of tweak a little bit if you so desired. So
Yes.
Firearms. Ha 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 ha. Let's put some gunpowder in D&D.
But you have to go up just one real quick because I got to throw something in here. I'm going to be looking to see how many mentions I can get. Previous page, the Armory. If you scroll down under Wisconsin, there is the Great Napoleons. That's where, if you guys ever care where my Napoleonicism and square buttonism came from, that is its first location on the east side of Milwaukee, much more. So there's Napoleon's. Okay. Speaking of gunpowder.
And as you're bringing that up, so campaign headquarters in Norfolk, Virginia, I think might actually still be on East Little Creek Road.
So good.
I'm 99% sure it's still there. It's been a couple years since I've been up to Norfolk, but the last time I was at the store a couple of years ago, I think it was still at that location.
Yes, so. This is 2526 East Webster Place. It's a restaurant now.
So not only were firearms, not only were we trying to inject make stick go boom into D&D, but our author, hi Ed, who inflicted the Forgotten Realms on us a few years later.
Sure did.
So, because nothing makes D&D even more entertaining like gunpowder, because we didn't already have fireballs and lightning bolts and plenty of ways to kill you. No. Let's add gunpowder, because otherwise you couldn't possibly rig up a combination of 2 or 3 spells to make your own landmines. No. Let's do it with gunpowder. One of the most volatile of all substances ever invented.
But it's indicative of the approach that these guys, Gygax, Greenwood, and the like, took to their gaming. Even look at Greenwood's cautionary notes, which are correctly quoted from the Dungeon Master's Guide.
Yeah.
Which is, don't put gunpowder into your games. Why? Because the minute gunpowder shows up, a lot of the medieval, what do we say, paraphernalia that surrounds D&D is mooted.
Yeah.
Castles become, until the invention of the more, the different designs of fortifications and things like that, become a real problem.
Yeah.
You're presenting to a cannon a straight vertical wall. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Otherwise known as a target.
But moreover, do you really need a cannon when you can just fireball your way through it?
Right, and that's
when you
the
can
thing, is that
transmute stone to mud and suddenly the wall melts instead of having to blow a hole in it.
But remember too, what is Roger Bacon accused of? Sorcery, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of this stuff looks like magic. And I've always loved gaming in the periods of transition. The end of the Middle Ages is fascinating, and I'm dating that in the 14th century. But I've also really loved the coming of the Middle Ages, the end of the Roman Empire, the Romano-Celtic thing, and all that. And as a consequence, this sort of a thing, I think when you draw that bright line, you're really losing part of the fun. And I respect very much this article's conversation that it has about, no, Matt, the gunpowder should be incredibly difficult to use. It should, as you say, unstable. And there should be a real consequence to, well, we can have Fuzel the Wizard melt the wall, or we can maybe kill all of us by using this pile of powder.
Yeah.
What should we do? There should be a really hard choice there.
Yeah.
He says at the bottom of 25, Dungeon Masters should not allow reliable handguns for shoulder arms. That's just true. Not only is
Scroll our way
historically
over to that.
it's
There we
a
are.
gameplay thing. If
Yes.
you want to use it, fine, but and it reminds me of where I come from, to be sure, in my approach to gaming. That's pretty neat.
Yeah. Okay, so early terrain card stock here that you can start throwing out for your minis on the tabletop, as well as the first of what will no doubt be a crap ton of Fantasy Games Unlimited ads over the years here. Aftermath being the post-apocalyptic role-playing game that they had. But let's face it, there's no shortage of FGU ads that we're going to see over our explorations of Dragon Magazine. Here's some more of the gun pieces, the table of guns, and then the abbreviated table of guns, just in case you're not dragging the entire magazine around and just want the wallet-sized reference card that you could cut out. The Werewolf, love this one. Back when Dragon Magazine ran fiction, back when you could get just a good yarn spun for you as a part of your reading. All right, so how much do you know about science in a fantasy world? Yeah. Let's just keep on moving.
Take the quiz above and see.
We're going to keep on moving. So, Gaming Magazine, here we go. A wholesome product, meet recognized standards of quality, yada, yada, yada.
But we have to, I want to go up and see what they were playing at Dalcon.
Oh, at Dalcon?
At Dalcon, let's see here. War, Car Wars, Dune.
I like that the Traveler Prize is a trip to the stars. What are they going to do, launch you?
I'm just saying, I'm always curious to see how many. Here's the crazy thing, folks. Most of these things look like, think about it, if you go to Historicon, or if you go to any of the more historically oriented cons, like we've got WhatCon coming up here in Rockford, Illinois, I think next weekend, you'll see a lot of these same games played.
We just had Southern Front here in town last weekend.
Yeah, and they've still got big games of Circus Maximus, big games of Ogre, big games of Car Wars.
Sword in the Flame.
Sword in the Flames. always, even though the author has passed on.
I love that they
A lot
just
of great
reference
stuff. Art and
computer
still
games
going
very
on.
generically.
Right, there will be computers with games on them. But plus the United States Diamondback Championship. I don't know what that is.
I
But
no idea.
wow, so a lot of good stuff. Way to go, Dalcon in Dallas, Texas. So Gaming Magazine.
Yes. So again,
So this was something inserted in.
yes. Well, but there is a reason for this. It's the first generic gaming magazine. Same stuff the other magazines contain, but without all the frills. You won't find a table of contents. You won't find page numbers. Keep in mind, which issue is this?
Well, let's see here. We have to go back up to the top, and I
yes, we do.
Is content.
It is
for gaming.
April.
Spring 1982. Yeah.
What did they do every April?
Got it. April Fools.
Something silly. Something horrifically silly.
So this is who plays the Boodle and the Grum Jugs.
Yes. So then we have the Flight of the Boodles game, in which the Boodles were trying to move from one side of the map to the other. And so Boodles could move. They weren't allowed to fight. The Boodle fighters could fight. And Boodle wizards could help move the Boodles around. And you had Boodle blasters, which were essentially casks with gunpowder that could launch you around the map, which always was a little entertaining because you were never quite sure where you were going to land. And that's what you got to do, was you got to move yourself from one side of the map to the other as the Grumjugs attempted to prevent you from doing so. I believe the graphics are at the end of the file here.
Correct.
So there's our Flight of the Boodles map. There are our Flight of the Boodles counters. So fairly low res image here. Sorry, people. Look it up online. You can find a better copy. But this was Flight of the Boodles. This one is a big deal to me because this is the first of the Dragon Magazine games that I played. Now, I don't think it's the first one I ever played as it appeared chronologically, but it is the first of the ones in my life that I actually sat down and played with some friends when I was living in California. So,
I can say that I have never. Well, this is the first time I've seen it.
So clearly never played it. Let's bounce our way back up. So here are Flight of the Boodles. Now, here is a second piece that I will bring up that I do find fairly entertaining because we find this throughout Dragon Magazine. There is a frequently asked questions for a game that premiered in this magazine. Go ahead and scratch your head over that one for a second.
Well, my comment on that is reading through it. It seems like this is the frustrated rage of every game designer that thinks that people should be getting their games more than they do.
Yeah,
understanding them more than they do.
Well,
what are you people stupid?
What this jumps out at me about is these are clearly responses to playtester comments that the designer was just too lazy to incorporate into the rules directly.
But when you give an answer like, when you get an answer like, a Grumjug driving a Grum buggy can split his movement around the setting or discharge of a Grum bomb or other Grum jug, but a Boodle being cannot split movement before and after being blasted by a Boodle blaster. Isn't this unfair? Response: being blasted is by definition a traumatic experience. Talk to anyone who's blasted. Like I say, I'm not sure they're taking this entirely seriously.
Yes, and yet, hey, this is the April Fool's issue. Is this a joke? Nope.
Yeah,
Let's keep going here. Some examples of play. There we go. But of course, being the April issue, the specialty NPC class that is introduced here is the Jester, with a thoroughly non-funny image accompanying it there. One of the things that always cracked me up about, hey, let me introduce all of these NPCs with all of these specialty classes and specialty abilities, and yet I don't know anyone who ever actually had these show up as NPCs. Instead, everybody always wanted to be the player character. I want to be the Jester. I want to be the Duelist. I want to be the Cavalier. I want to be the whatever. They were never NPCs. They were always sort of player characters in disguise.
Yep, absolutely right.
Which is why they gave them all level titles.
Well, and this goes back to our point about expecting things and looking forward to them in the mail, right?
Yes.
Because you could be the guy that brought to the table, hey, I'm going to be the Jester. That sounds weird today. I get it. But you know what? People look at it and go, new character, one that's in no other magazine or offering,
Yeah.
And people like that.
It's sort of like
the new,
you being the only person who had the really cool card in the collectible card game before everybody figured out that you could just post deck manifests online and ruin it for everybody.
Exactly, because let's face it, in 1982, where are you going to find out the stats for the Jester?
Dragon Magazine.
Because you're sitting around with your guys, right? You got your 6 boys, you're sitting around a table, and you're getting ready to play D&D. It's like, well, wait a minute. Who says that there's a character called a Jester? Ha-ha, Dragon Magazine.
Yeah, wham! Let me drop this Dragon Magazine on your table.
And now all of a sudden, you are the Jester. In fact, I'm the level 12 High Jester.
Yes.
It's great.
And then a little bit of short fiction to accompany the Jester. By the way, here are some spells that the Jester gets to cast. I'm not really sure how Hold Animal or Hold Person really belongs in a Jester's arsenal, but hey, we'll go with it. And then Midgets in the Earth by Roger Moore. Here's now where we're actually starting to make fun of people. And oh, by the way, these in some cases are a little obvious. Mork the Orc.
Well, and the other thing is, look, I understand the graphics budget is what it is, but Edie Little Daddy Snitman,
yeah,
that you're not drawing that today.
No.
Oh no, you're not.
No, you're not.
That's gives me kind of the squick just looking at it, to be honest.
Yes.
I'm not a hypersensitive guy, but that's not cool.
Sorry, I'll go back up for you there.
Like I say, Mork the Orc, stuff like that. But people realize, and like I say, the budget is what it is.
Yeah.
Oh, and then they gave Phil Folio the Artist of the Month award.
Yeah. So I love the comment that he adds there. But in addition to that, you notice the numbers in the background.
Yep.
That is classic Phil humor right there.
Oh yeah, and he's still with us and drawing stuff. So
oh yes,
that is pretty cool.
He's still drawing some great stuff. I appreciate the color by numbers humor of it all. So
absolutely.
The Dragon's Bestiary. Here's the other reason I wanted to pull this one up. These were the Saturday morning monsters. Oh. Yes, they statted out the Jolly Green Giant and Donald Duck and Marvin the Martian and the Tasmanian Devil.
I am so happy by this. I've never seen this. This is absolutely delightful. Let's see, because yes. I got a friend I have to share.
Hang on. With. So here you go. The Valley Giant, the Jolly Green Giant, obviously has several spells unique to himself. The Sonic Boom. Upon utterance of the words "ho ho ho," this spell causes the victim to take 6 to 36 points of damage and lose a point of intelligence. The Teleport Boxed Material.
One must love the fact that he apparently has elven minions who he is compelled to labor in his agricultural fields.
Well, that is thanks to his Charm Undersized Being spell up here, as well as the Polymorph Sprite Farmer. So yes, that in fact is exactly what he is doing.
That's not bad.
The Marvin the Martian over here.
I enjoy the Tasmanian.
Oh, Tasmanian Devil. There we go.
Oh, there he is. There's the guy. Tasmanian Devil is all right. I got a friend who's obsessed with this. With Taz, he's got a Taz tattoo and the whole bit. I'm just curious what they aligned him as chaotic neutral, which I think is accurate.
It's fairly accurate.
Number in lair, good. He's never in his lair. That's right.
Yes.
16-inch in the whirlwind, armor class for good.
Yeah. Slow-witted and can be tricked by anyone impersonating a Tasmanian she-devil.
Nice. All right. Not bad. Good job. I agree. And then we have Marvin, who is lawful evil. Very good.
Yes.
105 hit points. Holy.
Yeah. Well, has anybody ever killed him?
Fair.
All right. Let us continue. We have the baseball bugbears.
Right.
We have the Werebeaver, who bears a striking resemblance to a certain 50s sitcom character.
We have, Gen Con East, another attempt to have another Gen Con.
Yes.
at which they were going to. Oh, look at this!
I was looking because I thought we were forgetting. I thought we were missing some Saturday Morning Monsters, but I think those may have been in a different issue.
Yeah.
So,
and they're getting out. Oh, look at this! They're getting out Gangbusters.
yes.
Oh, as well as 4 new mini games. I think I know what those mini games were. Oh wow! And here it is, folks. Start at the beginning or end at the beginning. Who are the special guests?
Oh,
Igor
sorry.
Gygax and Duke Seafried.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, Duke Seafried is a legend in the historical miniatures gaming universe for his lavish and elaborate miniatures games displays. I had the privilege of Historicon 5 years ago or so. He was the guest of honor, and he put on a full dozen of his best games, and I got to play in 2 of them, and they were typically valued at $50,000 to $100,000 each because unfortunately due to failing health he had to sell them.
Yeah.
And just spectacular. So here was Gen Con East honoring one of the giants of miniatures gaming. So that's pretty crazy.
In
And
82.
this was Gen Con East in Lake Geneva.
All right, so we've got our convention schedule. Some of these conventions, I think, might actually still be ongoing because Genghis Khan, I think, is still around.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think it's in the same spot, certainly in Colorado. So
it may well be. It may not be in Metro State College in Denver anymore. I think it may have moved over to the convention center. I know Origins happens to still be around. It's just not in Baltimore. We've got the Heroes of Olympus role-playing game, role-playing heroic fantasy game. Let's face it, this was as much single campaign, single character hex encounter game as anything else. Let's move ourselves on here. Come on, let's move ourselves on here. There we go. Top Secret, the Top Secret role-playing game.
Such a great game, so good.
Ironic as I've got James Bond's Casino Royale on in the background here. The great thing about Top Secret is that I think one of the things that helped buoy Top Secret sales is that shortly after Top Secret was released, they didn't necessarily reboot the James Bond franchise, but they got away from some of the silliness of the earlier Roger Moore era movies, and they released For Your Eyes Only, which I still contend is a top 2 or 3 all-time James Bond movie. They got away from the stupidity that was Moonraker and actually got back to important secret agent stuff and gave you For Your Eyes Only, which had real legit espionage, having to uncover sorts of things. And so I really think that helped Top Secret along a bunch. Just my 2 cents.
I think also you had the coming of age of the Reagan. This is right at the heart of the first part of the Reagan presidency and the Cold War.
Yep.
And this was the height of Cold War espionage. So it was a contemporary, interesting topic.
Yes. You'll notice also that this Top Secret sort of creating a new agent. This was penned by Gygax himself. So
yes.
Here we go. How do we create new agents? Hey, look, a Fantasy Games Unlimited ad.
Check it out.
Who saw that coming?
This time they'll be talking about space opera.
Yeah. All right, the Trojan War, the early years.
man, I love this game. It's a box game. It's a mini box game. It costs a fortune. My copy is, as you might imagine, I purchased it in 1983. It's not in the best of shape, but getting this in any kind of decent shape, you're looking at $30 for a little bitty box game.
Yes. Yes.
This is one of the series of metagames that includes Rommel's Panzers and Stalin's tanks, ramming speed, and a whole bunch of others that came in little bitty boxes, and it's a great little game.
I will say you can still find some of those in their little bitty boxes on occasion at Origins because Excalibur Games still has a decent stockpile of them.
Yep.
Something I do want to point out down here: educators, clergymen, psychologists. We want a piece of your mind.
Can you imagine this? This really struck me when I was scrolling through this, listening to this. If you're a teacher or a church leader, have you tried to use your ideas from role-playing games in sermons? Which, given the Jack Chick approach to Dark Dungeons, it's amazing.
Well, not just that, but the Mazes and Monsters novel, I believe, had been released at this point. The movie, not yet, because Tom Hanks, I think, was still in high school at this point.
Right. Either that or doing Bosom Buddies, I can't tell. but it's, that's amazing. That
Yes.
would be something that, wouldn't you just love to know the results they got from that?
Oh, I would be dying to know, but I'm not 100% sure we could scrape that out of anybody. Even if they could find the results, I have a feeling that there's like some blood oath back at the old TSR to never divulge whatever those results may have been.
Mm.
So, the puka for this critter from Celtic myth.
That's hey, why not, right? And then we get to the internet. We get again our view of the internet. What do all these figures look like if you were to buy them from Ral Partha, Grenadier, Heritage, more Grenadier, and then
Yep.
a 285th scale building? That's micro armor, folks. That's
Yeah,
nothing
it
you're
is.
going to do for fantasy.
Yep.
But that's so crazy. I mean, it's bad photos. I mean, look, these photos. I mean, it's the only way. But I will say this: as bad as photography was, or as difficult as photography was, it's interesting that their emphasis was on showing you the detail of the figure for painting purposes, trying to get as high contrast as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, because let's face it, these are some pretty crap photos.
Yes.
And whoever thought to photograph them against a black background, don't do that, people. Just don't.
That's a note to you.
Yes. And hey, look, more stuff coming from Ral Partha. I would love to hear the story of sort of how Ral Partha fell apart at the end of it all, because I'm not really sure they're a going concern anymore. But there was a good 10 to 15 years there where Ral Partha sort of, that was the name in fantasy miniatures. As much or more even than Games Workshop. Look, I was living in Europe where Games Workshop rules everything, and yet Ral Partha was what everybody wanted to get their hooks into.
And they wound up doing a whole bunch of other stuff, including the original run of Steve Jackson's Ogre miniatures.
Yeah. Here's some. Okay, so has there ever been any topic in D&D that has been more exhaustively argued to less importance than alignment?
Well, and your entire statement is what's important. Because to me, I am firmly against any table of reaction rolls. You are charismatic, therefore you get +3 on reaction rolls. I don't understand why you're not just then playing a chart.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with alignment. I have a pretty strong sense of what lawful, chaotic, and neutral good are, and I'm pretty sure about the moral choices I'm going to have you make as a game master. But I think it's just this compulsion on the part of some. Well, what are the rules? Well, what do the rules say? Dude, we've been arguing about the rules of alignment, morality, since we've been a species.
Yeah.
What makes you think Gary Gygax or anybody else is going to be able to crank out a credible set that's going to hold up to all circumstances?
Yeah. 0. Let me just go ahead and...
I said, yeah, I mean, we have entire belief systems followed by billions of people, and we haven't come to a common understanding of that. It's always struck me as crazy.
Yeah. But I mean, even today, there's still people writing alignment articles, and nobody gives a rip. People might write down an alignment to make sure that you are conforming to whatever rules of a particular class that you're playing. But the reality is people are going to play how they're going to play. And it's not like people go, I want to do – oh, crap, I can't do that. That's not within my alignment. People just do it anyway.
Well, and by the same token, you know what? It did give us all the really cool memes with
yes,
all the different alignments and what they represent in various parts of the world.
And of particular humor, if you can find the one where they lay out all the alignments with Big Bang Theory, that one's actually pretty darn funny.
Yeah, so there you go. So it's good for that.
Don't take the spawn of Fashan seriously.
I never did, really. But
yeah. Hey, look, a Fantasy Games Unlimited ad.
This one's Bushido.
This is going to be a running theme for this entire series of videos.
Check it out. We may need at some point to get a sting for that.
Yeah.
Fantasy Games Unlimited ad.
Here we go. What's new with Phil and Dixie? Here comes Phil Fabio. Hi-ho, folks. This month we're talking about mini games. Fairly recent development, for a long time thought to be impossible. Role-playing game that can be played in only 20 minutes. There you go.
And this was something that was coming out because people were beginning to observe correctly that these games took too bloody long.
And what's amusing though about the panel up there in the top right, the AD&D Rules Volume 14, replace AD&D with ASL. And you're not wrong.
Yeah. I, well, you know, when you've got something like ASL that felt the need to put out a starter set, and that starter set itself has now run, I think, to 6 boxes.
Yeah.
I think your point's been made.
The of the mini games that were out around this time, you know, the metagaming was starting to do their thing, but TSR also had a handful of theirs as well. They've invaded Pleasantville. Revolt on Antares was always a favorite one that I loved to death. But Saga, the original one, the original game called Saga that TSR released before they had the Saga system role playing thing with the Dragonlance reboot in the mid '90s. The original Saga role playing game was it was the Norse equivalent of the Quinto mythology game, which was a map and counter fantasy adventure game, but was actually quite a great little game. And the nice thing about it is Saga played solo very well. I enjoyed playing that one solo many times. We're winding up our Dragon Magazine number 60 here, with Phil Foglio's spawn of the demon here attacking Phil and Dixie. But we've run out of page numbers, indicating that we're on the back cover right here. The second Advanced Dungeons and Dragons painting competition.
Sponsored by Grenadier Models at Where Gen Con 15.
Yes. And then there's our Fiend Folio ad on the back cover, and then our Boodles pieces. So
this was a good episode. This was a good issue.
This is Dragon Magazine 60, mixture of humor as well as a couple of serious things here and there. And we hope you've enjoyed this. And don't worry, we've got more to come. So if you hated it, don't worry, we've got more to come.
Awesome.